Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Chapter 19. We're going to be talking about geography and the early settlement of China. Okay? Now, as we study Chapter 19, the question we want to answer, our driving question or essential question, is going to be how did geography affect life in ancient China? So, we're wondering how the earth in China affected it here as we go through chapter 19. So, how did geography affect life in ancient China? Here we go. So, what you're going to do is you're ultimately going to be writing down information on the sheet that you have in front of you, and you're going to be working your way through this video to help you fill out that sheet. Now, remember, there's going to be parts where you can pause the video. Make sure you do that. If you need to go back, that's the beauty of having this video, and you can go back as many times as you need to. And don't forget, you can always ask questions too. So those are some things to think about as you go through this. So let's take a look. So take a look at the preview section of your sheet, and it's going to ask you a few questions. First thing we're going to talk about is geography. So it says physical features, climate, and vegetation influence human communities. So here are some examples of how that works. So basically, if a community is near the ocean, okay, a major industry or a way that they make money in the community might be fishing. So if you're near water, there's a good chance that there's going to be a large economy surrounded by fishing, which means that there's a lot of jobs that have to do with fishing, okay? Then let's talk about some of the physical features. So if a community has really hot summers, what that means is that houses are generally going to have things like air conditioning, or you might say they might have more swimming pools, okay? So we'll see then how the climate, the weather, affects different communities in different ways. And that would be climate, okay? So now, if a community has forests, it may have a lumber industry, okay? So that means that this community would make its money by using the forests either to harvest the lumber or something along those lines. And that would be how vegetation affects this community, okay? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to take a look at the preview. So if you come up here and you take a look on your sheet right at the top here, this is your preview section, basically the entire sheet. You're going to turn to the preview activity in your interactive student notebook, and you'll just have the sheet in front of you. What you're going to do is take a look at the charts, and you're going to circle words in the charts and answer the questions about the geography of our community, and that would be Holland, Michigan. So let's take a look. Which of these do you think, which physical features do you think would characterize the community of Holland, Michigan? So you look at all the different ones and determine which of these would you say helps describe the physical features of Holland. So just take a moment and circle some of those answers on your sheet. So let's take a look. What did you circle? If you look at it, you could argue that most of them along water would be something that would characterize Holland, Michigan. We all know that we're near Lake Michigan. You could call Lake Macatawa even a bay. We know that river, the Black River, feeds into Lake Macatawa, which then feeds into Lake Michigan. And you could even say there are some creeks around, absolutely. You might say hills with the dunes and things like that, even some plains with some of the farmland that is around Holland. So those would be an argument for some of the things that you might have circled in terms of physical features for Holland. So then how do these physical features influence our community? And that's a question I want you to think about that we'll discuss a little bit later on. So think about how these physical features influence our community. So now let's take a look at our climate features, okay? Take a look at the summer temperature, the winter temperature, and precipitation, and take a second to circle that. So how would we describe our summer temperature here in Michigan? How would you describe our winter temperature? And then in terms of rain and snow, how would you describe that? So if you take a look at it, the summer temp might be described between really hot and mild. I mean, some points in summer are really hot. Some can be characterized as mild. So really somewhere in between here, I think would characterize our summers. Now, in terms of our winter temperatures, I think it's easy to say that it is pretty darn cold here in the winter. If you've been here in the past few years, we know that we have some pretty cold winters. And then when we take a look at the rain and snow, really we could talk moderate to heavy, particularly in the winter months and the spring months for sure. Okay, so that would be some ways, some of the things that you might have done in terms of the climate features of our community. So now here's the other question. How does climate influence our community? Okay. So think about some of those things in the summer and the winter and the kind of precipitation we have. How does it influence our community? And you can think of it in all different ways. Does it influence our schools? Does it influence our city itself? How does it influence the people? So think about some of those things. So now we want to think about what natural vegetation do we have in our community? How would you describe the things that grow in our community? Okay, so think to yourself, give yourself a mental picture of what kind of vegetation do we have here? And then how does this vegetation now influence our community? Okay, so how do the things that grow here influence our community? So that's how we want to think about this. And we'll talk about that as a class here a little bit later on. So basically, just as geography influences in everybody's life, the geography of ancient China influenced the history of that country. So again, something that we share in common is that geography influences our life as well as the lives of those living around the world in the past, present, and future. In this lesson, you're going to learn about 5 important regions of China. So different areas of China, that's what we're going to be talking about in this chapter. Then you're going to find how the geography of these regions affected the early settlement of China. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the land itself. We're going to look at the climate, the vegetation, and see how that affects the settlement of China thousands of years ago. So a couple of things you're going to want to make sure that you understand. There's some key content terms, and we'll be getting to this a little bit later on, but it's good to know what they are. The key content terms are going to include region, climate, oasis, North China Plain, and tributary. And we'll be adding a lot of other words to this as well, but these are some big ones that you really want to make sure that you understand by the time we finish up this chapter. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go through and read section 1. And you can do this using the textbook, and that'll be totally fine. And what you're going to do is you're going to use the information from this section and from the image that you see on the right, which looks like the image of a river, and you're going to propose some possible answers to the essential question that I've posed to us earlier. So you're just going to think about how might that information help you answer this particular question. And remember, we're just throwing some ideas out there, and that's what we're doing. We're not looking for necessarily right or wrong answers. We're just looking for some possible answers. Okay, so how did geography affect life in ancient China? And that's going to be the question that we keep on coming back to, and we're going to be gathering information to help us do that. Okay.